Bad food crops all around except the far west. Well, the Northeast didn't get that hurt by theirs. However, it's still, they were expecting more. They can feed their people off this, but it's going to be hard to produce consumer goods. Likewise, with the Southwest, or the Midwest, a 10% decrease. Again, they got enough to feed their people, but there's no stockpiles left anymore. When we look at the Midwest, or the Southwest, they took a 20% hit. But again, because of their heavy industrialization, they actually can feed their people. They're going below last time, but not by too much. They've moved more labor into the market. And then for the far west, they actually got a plus 20% bonus. Now this is where the fuel optional rule, the fuel and fertilization optional rule, really seems like it could help. I've tried playing with it and it's never done it for me, and I didn't want to cope with it this time, although. So the way it works is if you have stockpiled food points, you have to have farm sector 1. Every 3 good areas, you expend a stockpiled fuel, and you get +1 on your food dar roll. Which is really a big deal because, a 6 is a pretty likely number. And that's a 10% decrease. And a 10 is a pretty unlikely number, and that can give you a little boost there if you can get into that range more. Obviously, it's even more of a difference if you're sitting over here on the worst table. Now, I call this the worst table, but it really isn't. Because here's the thing. Your most likely increase or decrease is at the same point in the same value. Yes, it gets harsher as things get worse, but you have more of a chance of an increase. So, in some ways, with the fuel fertilizer option, it may be a better table. It's hard to tell. And that may be one of the things that has sometimes led me to think, gee, cutting those territories off isn't such a bad thing. Oh, shit. Oh no, I only rolled an 11. I was just looking at, they're down to 5 areas in the far west. All right. Well, on to secondary production and figuring out what the hell's actually going on here. It feels hopeless for the Northeast. So, in order to maintain my current level, I need 2 consumer points. That actually drops me below what I have food-wise. So now I need food. I may end up starving someone, may end up disassociating. If I do, it's this territory. And then, well, I built myself an extra plant just because I don't want to particularly lose, although I have a ton of these sites. I have 16 of them. The main reason I built the plant was to utilize my full capacity. But it meant I built no max, right? Is that possible? Must have built some. I built 369. I should have bought 1 Mac. And I don't know if I paid for it here, but I got the utilization, so I assume I did. So I got 1 set of mechs. The real thing is, I don't have much use for more mechs. This sector, this sector, this sector, they're all up at the top. Mechs are almost useless, even as trade bait. I needed another consumer point, so I bought 3 sets of them, right? No, 2 sets of them, which got me 10 more consumer points because I was 1 short from being able to allocate what I needed to the metal sector. I didn't want to fall behind. I doubt that I'll be able to feed my people, though. So I'm going to start losing more and more population. And then the mechs become even less worthwhile, right? But the only hope is to stockpile and try to make that push forward. And if I don't do it soon, I'm not going to be able to. Oh, plus, here's the bonus. More population next turn, huh? Everyone's panicking. Attempted another great leap forward here. Gonna starve a bunch of people, the hell with them. This is probably really foolish, but for the Southwest, they've decided to spend a lot of their excess and buy consumer points. They've got themselves up to 38. That's enough for them to push forward. 29 of them go here. 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, maybe 35. They may have 3 extra consumer points on the market for sale. There are no additional mechs for them. They may be willing to trade consumer points, those 3 consumer points, for additional mechs to boost their food production for next turn. This is their attempt to push their economy and over that edge. Other people are kind of stockpiling, getting a lot of consumer points. Now there are mechs available over here in huge quantities. I got 18 of them available. We'll talk about them. They're in an interesting position. Over here, he's got a couple of mechs and he's building up, but I think he actually needs those mechs, and we've got more plant being built. And then finally, the Far West. The Far West, after starving last turn and then getting a huge food increase this turn, says, you know what? I got a shot. Not at making the leap forward. Oh, actually, he's not far. He's got 15 labor here. He's stockpiled 20 consumer points. He's got a huge amount of mechs that he's not using. Now, they'll depreciate pretty quickly, but he might be able to make the leap forward if the Southwest trades with him, for the simple fact that between them they may have enough to both go forward and to give them each some mechs. That may work out. One of the problems with this game is you have to build according to the patterns here, which means you can't really balance your economy perfectly. You have a lot of fiddling and a lot of little levers you can do, but there's these break-off points. You don't have as much flexibility as you do in, say, I don't know, some other games. Trying to think of one in particular, Stellar Conquest up there would be a good choice, where you have this ability to kind of play with your economy. But on that, your economy just grows. You know, this is one of the few games that I know of where your economy is just so hosed and you have no chance. Now, that's what's attractive to some people and eminently frustrating to me. I want it to be just a little bit easier. Anyway, if I had that flexibility, that might be the move that made it possible. It's also no fun to play solitaire, but that's a separate issue. So yeah, there may be a trade available to move some mechs over there for their excess, because let's see what we're at. We're at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 would be what we need to push these guys over. So I need one more consumer point. Now, there's going to be a fuel expense to traveling mechs across that distance, but maybe not too terrible. My domestic cost is only, if I transfer actual trading units, my domestic cost is only 5, which means I've got 100. So I can ship there for free with the 1 fuel I've got to spend for internal. This guy, however, has to spend a fuel. Or maybe the Far West is willing to do it. Because to tell you the truth, the consumer points are the more valuable thing. But I see a potential for a deal there. Other people, well, looks like we're starving our people and still not going to make the jump forward. Because we need 23 consumer points just to get our labor, and we only have 21 there. So we're kind of doing the Far West tactic. Let's starve, disassociate an area, and start peeling areas off in the hope that someday we can make it in our save-up turns. Because we're getting close, you know. It's panic time. If you don't have your economy stabilized at 2 at this point, you're just going for the... You never find out if it actually does stabilize, you know what I mean? But yeah, there's another turn. But when I started looking at things, if you don't make this leap forward, it doesn't look like you make it. It's a matter of you can't stockpile usually in the condition we're in. Now, the Southwest was able to stockpile a lot of consumer points because of the deals it was making to keep its economy running, because people were running short on food. So they were trading food or consumer points to other people. But now they don't really need the mechs that terribly. They could use them, but what they really needed is the consumer points, and all of them that they can buy and produce almost. That transfer was made. 3 mechs and a consumer, 3 mechs and a pile of money for 2 consumer points. The pile being $5. Not a huge amount, but the Southwest's a little low on money, and the I don't know if there's a trade anywhere else. Nobody's got the excess of food. In fact, the only person I think who's feeding their people is the Far West. They chose not to make the leap forward on a starvation because they don't want to lose more territory. Now, next turn they can starve. Next turn's their follow-up turn. They can use their output. This is what the Southwest almost assuredly should have done. You make that limit, you keep it, you scrabble, you hold on to it, you grab it, and just, you know, you'll make back the ground. They could have given up some crappy terrain. They made a mistake by having reached that level and then allowed themselves to slip down rather than starve. Starve 5 people or whatever. You don't want to starve more than 5 and you don't want to fail to disassociate. So this is always a crapshoot. You starve people, it's not a guarantee because you're playing on this table. And you're probably only got a 50% chance of losing an area. It depends on what your social state is, but at social state 1, you got a 50% chance of losing an area. You don't lose the area, you still have those starving fuckers in your economy, and now they're a real problem. Because you've got to convert them to unemployed by giving them food, and then you have to convert them into your labor force by giving them consumer goods. If you don't give them consumer goods, if you leave them unemployed, it's fine when they're starving. If you leave them not for them maybe, but if you leave them just unemployed and feed them, they become like criminals and stuff. They'll cause unrest. But if they're truly starving, they're no problem. Mind you, this is why you have no right to make people starving. The only way you can do it is by creating consumer goods and driving your food down. If you have any food, any surplus, any stock, anything at all, it has to be used to feed the people. You cannot make starving people. So it's fairly easy to do it still, and advantageous because you're turning that food into what you need to win. We'll see. By starving 10 people here, I had enough produce. I kind of screwed up with it in the sense that, well, that was a higher starvation than I needed to do because I needed less consumer points. Because the starving don't have to be given them. They've moved over here into the starving pile. Well, that reduced amount of consumer points allowed me to actually boost both the Far West and the Midwest, trading for some mechs from both, so that I'm going to have more food production with the Southwest, and they're each going to actually make their Sector State 2 in farming and be able to move their own mechs into their farm production. And let's see what we got here. We got 15 and 30 there. I haven't moved them yet for these guys. So 3 more mechs into the farm circle. And he's got 18 and 26. That's going to help them make their food requirements there. Of course, in both cases, we've got piles of starving people, and we can only hope that the area disassociates. But even if it doesn't, I can keep them starving until it does. I can also if I make it over the hump and things are good, then be able to bring them into my economy. But in worst case scenario, I can starve them off and maybe keep my position over there. And eventually there will be enough of a surplus of mechs in the farm sector that I can feed my people and produce the consumer goods that I need. Of course, might have a much smaller country there. The Northeast, unable to do anything, still playing the trying to bankroll, trying to save up its consumer points, but it's at 3 now. There's just it's just stuck in this traction, unable to get traction on the economy, basically because, well, it just doesn't have enough. It doesn't have enough oomph in its economy to push its way over the way these others have. It's doing this standing still, but it's not growing. That's the problem. All earlier points in the game, there was this growth. And this is one period that I'm used to in this game where you're sitting here saying, wow, I could build more mechs or not. There's nothing I can build. I can't build the consumer points because I don't have enough food production, because I don't have Sector State 2 in the food thing. Well, what it turns out is you got to kill off your people, I guess. Anyway, let's see how the disassociation rolls. And a little bit of depreciation, but not much. But it hits the Northeast the hardest. They lost 4 mechs, and they're just in this hopeless position. But if other people are making the hump, they may be able to produce mechs for those other people and get consumer points in exchange. So if they're all, if these two are able to make that stability position by starving their people off, then the Northeast might be able to do the same. And like all the areas, it does have some regions that disassociating them isn't that big a deal. So we can hope. All right, well, the only problem is we got a population gain, 10% increase on everybody. Things are quite rosy everywhere except the Northeast. Starvation is obviously the answer. No, I'm not sure yet, but we'll see. It looks very promising, which is what we saw the first time I played it. The poor Northeast may have to starve anyway. They don't have as much food as they have people. And, well, maybe it's their turn for the great leap forward. But they had a bad food roll. Southwest and Midwest had reasonable average food rolls. 50 food, I don't remember what else, 58. But the big surprise, a plus 20% on the far west, 54 food. That extra food is going to make for some interesting dynamics, because it means not only are they almost certain to make it to victory, and I think the others are too. I just haven't done the secondary yet. But they actually have excess that they could trade and maybe get some mechs off of the Northeast or something. That's going to be tough. That's a long route. It's a 90-point route, so again, it costs of fuel. Well, I'm not sure. I can get there for free. Can they get there for free? Because we both have excess transport. We could just leave that there. They don't quite have it. They've only got 80 fuel available, so they can't quite make that run around. And so it would cost an extra fuel to make that trade. However, if it's a good enough trade, the extra food, the extra, more importantly, the consumer goods might be able to help push the Northeast into the game again. The 3 people who starved their people are going to be able to make it to keep their farm sector up. I don't think anybody is in the position to leap ahead to that sector state, to the social state 2, the sector state 2 everywhere. But the big bonus for this is, well, one, now we know how to make the game actually work. Somewhere around turn 4 or 5, you should be able to starve some of your people, push your way into that, and then, it's actually pretty trivial from there. The problem, well, there's something disappointing about that in flavor, and once again, every now and then a rule book does this, where they go out of their way to say, hey, here's what you don't want to do in the game. Starve your people. And it's saying these are ways they can tell you how to lose. Don't mechanize your agriculture. Don't trade with other players. Well, starve your people is actually necessary as far as I can see. I guess I've never tried too hard before, at least not so early. And I think that's the real thing, is once you get up to a certain point, you won't grow anymore. The game just seems futile. you're trying to reach, you're hoping maybe I can get a good roll or whatever. If you can trade, hey, that's great, that helps you. But I think you're actually pretty much guaranteed, even in the solitaire game, if you're willing to take a starvation hit or two, to be able to push forward into the victory. And if you do it early enough, you actually would get to play. We're not going to see it here, but I think if you do manage to make that hump early enough, you'll get to play with the military units and maybe actually do some stuff. Who knows? I'm pretty fatigued at this point, but anyway, and I don't think I'm going to push it past turn 10. The Northeast produced a bunch of mechs. They also produced some consumer points. They're up to 8. That's enough to survive if they can't make trades, but they've talked to other people. There are some extra consumer points floating around. They can probably, there maybe aren't enough to make the leap, in which case maybe they want to trade for food. But at the very least, they'll be supplying other people with the food, with the mechs that they need, and then they'll be able, maybe next turn, to have stockpiled enough consumer points as well to be able to make that jump themselves, so that they can last it out for turn 10. The problem for them is they have to make the whole jump at once, and that's almost impossible. What we see here with the other people is still, I think, unguaranteed that they're going to reach social state 2. Some of them may, some of them may not. But at least they got their farm up to sector state 2, which it looks like they're at a position where they are not going to fall from that little ledge. I'll complete trading and see what happens from there. Yeah, the Northeast has so many problems, and there just aren't enough consumer points to make a good trade for it. So I don't want to starve this turn. I made a quick trade of 2 mech for 2 food. That's a significant deal for the guy getting the mechs, I guess. Except there's only one person who had the food to spare, and that was the Midwest. So it seemed like a fair deal for both people in a lot of different ways. Over here with the Southwest, I thought they had not extra food, but extra production in terms of consumer goods, but they really don't have as much as I thought. I forgot I've got 5 starving people. Those are going to turn into unemployed when I feed them. I have enough food for them. I have 50 food in store. I need 5 more consumer points to bring them into the labor market. So that kind of trims some of the excess that I'm producing, but clearly it looks like this is the way to boost yourself up. As I move into the political stage, one person has a problem which could be solved by the addition of more population. Namely the far west. I'm maxed out on my labor to mech ratio, but I have a pile of mechs available to use. I also could probably use more metal and or fuel. So a movement in this direction seems like the correct way to go. I'm not terribly interested in getting more factory sites. I can build those. That's easy at this point in the game. Early in the game, industrial sites may be of some importance, but now they're just something that you can spend industrial production producing. So I'm going to do a plebiscite here, actually, and that's going to cost me $9 to get good control of that. That'll add 5 more population. I can throw that into my labor pool, and then I've got room for 10 more mechs in my farm sector. So my farmers, instead of just producing 1 or 2 food each, now they're producing 3 food each with the mech production. Of course, shortages, etc., make that go bad. Drop that down a little bit. But as of right now, expansion actually makes sense. Not the only time in the game. You can remember the expansion into here made sense. There was expansion over here. But this is one where it makes sense just from a purely my economic system running, not just gaining sites and such now, but actually keeping the population in place. This works better. And there are times in that mid-game when you have the ability to produce max and you don't have the ability to jump your level up, where maybe getting more 2 times food producers out there or more 2 times anything producers in your economy is actually worthwhile. So some expansion may make sense even in the earlier stages. This time it definitely does, though. This time it looks like their only real hope to boosting themselves forward. Usually it's kind of a, my economy's humming along okay. All right, so we'll take care of that. Okay, people are pushing into turn 9. The three of them looking like they're going to make, well, that they have a shot. They got their farm sector state too. That's all I can say. No real heavy losses due to the depreciation tables this turn. With a little bit of luck, I think we might actually see somebody make the victory conditions of this. Only one way to do it, though, that I can see. You know, I mean, I've tried a lot of different things, and whatever. Well, poor production rolls for the Midwest and Northeast. The Northeast took a minus 20% hit. They're just doomed at this point. The Midwest might be able to still make the hump. If anything can stop you, though, it's that bad food production roll. On the other hand, the Southwest got a good food production roll. And that produced, what? 70 food. Just a plus 10%, but still, that should be able to get them over. Whether or not the far west can do it, their food production is the same as last turn at 54. Last turn was a tremendous, like, plus 20% bonus. This turn, they couldn't get that because they've expanded. But at least they broke with what they expected, and you know, that's kind of what you can hope for in this game. If you get a bonus, that's great. Maybe you can trade it to someone. Maybe you can get some use out of it. Maybe you have problems where you end up having to stockpile a bunch of it. 13 food stockpiled. You know, that's $13. They had a lot of cash, but it kind of dug into their reserves. I guess we'll go on to the secondary production and see what people are going to try to do to handle their own needs. These guys primarily want to make sure that they make it over the hump on this turn, because if you don't make it this turn, you lose. Right, you know what? Nobody can do it. Yeah, I thought I had something because I got my farm sector up to a sustainable sector state 2. Okay, maybe they can, but I don't want to play it. Everybody who's out there does not have enough industrial capacity. Normally when I play, you have plenty of industrial capacity because you're building tons of mechs. Continually increasing it and increasing your population and your mechs that's going into there. But maybe not enough to do this. Closest we have here, let's see, is the far west, who might actually be able to do it. They could send their surplus food, and they have 54 food here. They could send that through. Now they only need 31 of that. That means they have 23 extra food. That is enough, right? They only need to get 30 consumer points or 31 consumer points. They already have this, so they need 6 sets of them. Unfortunately, 6 sets of them is an 18 capacity, and I'm only up to 16. The delicate balancing act, I'm close to it, but it couldn't quite happen. Well, could I trade with someone? Yeah, only if they want to hand me the victory and I don't get it, and they're not going to get it. You know, the models out there are, the economies out there are on their way to a victory. But they didn't quite do it. It's still too hard. It's still too hard, even after this starving the people. Now maybe if the Southwest had done it early, when they had their first shot, they'd be in perfect shape here. So, you know, it is possible to win. I think we've shown that, but let's look at the Southwest. And now, there is another option. What if I spend so much food and trade it away that I don't have enough food to feed my people, so I starve some of them so I can get my sector states up? Can I maintain that? And the answer is probably. But I do not want to play that game. You know, my hope here was, let's get this so that somebody wins, and we can see, hey, if you extended this to 20 or 30 turns, if you're really insane, you would not only be able to win this game, but actually play the game that seemed to be packaged in this. You know, the one with these military units in it, right? I think you can get there. I think I've shown that by starving your people, you can get there. But damn it, I don't want to play 10 turns about maybe, I don't know, it takes probably at least a half hour a turn. So 5-6 hours is what I've been used to with this, maybe a little longer actually. Of this most obnoxious bookkeeping Euro style. I mean, this really is like the modern heavy Euro, okay? The old Euros, no, not at all. But the modern heavy Euro has a lot in common with this, although this and this, in terms of components for tracking the information, a lot less. In terms of the ease of making the decisions, this is probably easier to grasp what you should be doing, but it's wrong, whatever you grasp. I mean, you think you should be improving your economy and stuff, when really the whole goal to the game is to figure out that puzzle of starving your people and doing it at the right time. It becomes an optimization with this little thing, and I could see people really getting a kick out of it. I could, but not me. Anyway, let's look at the Southwest situation, because I'm calling this the wrap here. I don't want to play 2 more turns of this when nobody can win. And I don't want to try to extend it. My weekend's been used on this. That's more than I should have. So for the Southwest, their situation is they need to supply 50 of these points. Now, they need 50 food as well. They have 70, so they have 20 extra food. So 20 food means that I can produce 10 sets of these, which is 50 of the points. So I've got enough materials for that. I think I've got enough stockpiled in these for 10 each. Although, fuel, yep. I got enough stockpiled that I could do it for 1 turn. Remember, I'm not adding to my production. I'm not getting any additional mechs here, right? So I'm not going to make it a 2nd turn anyway. I'll just collapse. However, again, my capacity is the issue. I've only got 17. To get 50, and I have, some stockpiled, 4 stockpiled. To get a 50 set, I'm going to need to do that 10 times, which means 30 capacity. I don't have anywhere near that. Again, could I starve people? Yeah, maybe. The others are in worse shape, and I've just wasted too much time on this game. I have never completed a game of this, I think, except for one opposed game where we came close, where one person came close. Came close to getting it for 1 turn. He failed his, he had to make some die roll, the disassociation or something. He failed that, and then wasn't able to maintain sector state 2 across the board for a 2nd turn. And basically he boosted everything up at once. Or at least that was his plan. But yeah, even with the starvation, do I think it can be done? I don't know. There are people who claim it can. I don't think that it's very likely, but I also don't think that it's a fun game. Just because even once you know that, all you're doing is bookkeeping and optimizing, and yes, you're facing some risk here, which I like some kind of risk management strategy, but in this game it's not risk management strategy. Right? It's there's an element of that, but most of it is just about this horrible quantity of optimization, and you're cutting it too close to the edge no matter what. It's too fine. Now, here's the other thing. Let's say somebody did go for the win, with the cheesy win or whatever. Well, other people could mobilize their damn armies and ruin them. It is trivial to take somebody out of this game, especially yourself, but and so damn hard. I mean, because you're working on such an edge there as to how much population, etc. you have. Now, What's the problem with that? Well, you probably can't ruin them in 2 turns. They'll probably still have areas that they own, but you'll be degrading areas to poor standing, and that causes havoc with the economy. I don't think that they'd survive to be able to stay at social state 2. Can't be sure. Starvation works a lot better than you would think it does. It's your only way to like get your people happy enough and your government solid enough. Not because you needed to starve some people off, particularly in order to meet your goals. It's just so horrible for me to contemplate this thing. I think it could be tweaked. I think some minor things in the system, like adding the fertilizer, actually would aid this greatly. But still, that final optimization to get over the hump, and that's why you can't have a big economy, because you can't even starve off enough people safely to make the hump there. But this is just so pointless to me. So I'm hanging this one up here. I don't usually call things early, but at least we know everybody's losing, because none of them are willing to try and win at this point, because winning just doesn't even make sense in this game anymore. The 1-turn hurdle of, that great leap forward type idea, I'm okay with that comparatively. Yeah. Except where it tells you in the rules. Yeah. The first thing you don't want to do is starve your people. That's the worst thing you can do, basically, is what they're saying. No, it's not the worst thing you can do. The other things that they list there are much worse. But starving your people is actually, I think, necessary to even win. All right, up it goes.